of a baseball fan wanting to be Roberto Clemente. But I tell you, just in the past few years, it is hard not to enjoy soccer and see the excitement that is brought to our great city. What impresses me most is when you see the little kids enjoying this sport. And so then with the success of FC Cincinnati, I think when the team moved from Clifton, and it was so exciting over there, you thought, oh wow, they're gonna build this new stadium, it'll be larger, will they be able to fill it? You started thinking that, and then, you're going into another league, why don't we just keep things the way they are? But they have just been so exciting and so impressive. Today we have with us a young man who signed back in 2022 with FC Cincinnati. I know he had a busy night last night. But Dominique Badji is originally from Senegal. Eventually came to the U.S., played soccer with Boston University, was an outstanding collegiate athlete. I was asking one of my coworkers, who is a huge soccer fan. I tried to get her to come here, but she said, "Oh no, I'd be too nervous, But I thought she'd like to meet you. But I said, "Hey, tell me about him." She didn't talk about your skill as a soccer player. What she talked about was your outside activities and your humanitarian spirit and how you give back. And that was pretty impressive, because she could have given me all the stats, told me all your background as a soccer player, but she told me more about you as a human being. And you heard me mention Roberto Clemente, who is my all-time idol. That's what his lasting legacy was, not as a Hall of Fame baseball player, but as one of the greatest humanitarians ever. And so your presence here today, I mean, we know how difficult last night was, and you keep a busy schedule. So that means a lot to everyone here, that you took the time out of your busy schedule to be a part of this great organization. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dominique Badji.
That's a tough act to follow. As you all know, my name is Dominique Badji. I haven't given a speech like this in a very long time. My speeches are usually in the locker room before games, include some profanity, and get people going. So this is a little different. Hopefully y'all learn a little bit about me and my life. Something I haven't really talked to a lot of people about. People know what they read online, but there's a lot more depth to things that you might just read on the internet. So please bear with me with this speech. So I'm from Dakar, Senegal, a small West African country. We have about 18 million people. About 95% of the country is Muslim, 4% Christian, and 1% other. My family, the Badji family, we make up for almost 2% of the Christians in Senegal. So if you ever come across a Senegalese person, there's a high chance that they'll be Muslim. All my friends growing up were Muslim, every single one of my friends, and my family members were the only Christians that I ever hung around. The nickname for Senegal is Teranga. Teranga, it derives from Wolof. Wolof is our national language. Teranga emphasizes generosity of one's spirit and the sharing of material possessions, even with strangers. Within Teranga, there's hospitality, respect, community, and solidarity. We're all one. Regardless of nationality, religion, class, Senegal creates an environment where everybody feels safe and welcome. In the US, it's common to say it takes a village, especially when raising kids. Teranga embodies that, but for anybody at any stage of life, not just kids, because people run into problems, people need help at during different times of their lives. A common thing we do in Senegal is eat in a communal bowl with our hands, and that embodies Teranga. People are so busy in the household all day, we don't really have time to slow down and be present, and so a lot of lunches or dinners will be around a single bowl, and that's when you're able to catch up with family and see how their day's going, and just be present more than anything. I grew up lower class. My mom was a maid, and my dad was a translator. My parents were gone for most of the day, providing for us, and I stayed at home with my cousin. My cousin was a few years older than me. She might have been 8 years old, and she was the one that was taking care of the house while my parents were away. But again, Teranga, our community was our family, and so yes, my parents were away, but my neighbors were my parents when my parents weren't there. I could go over there whenever I needed. It was my home. Anywhere in the neighborhood was my home. If I needed a shower, if I needed food, entertainment, or if I needed somewhere to sleep, I could just knock on anybody's door and that would be home for me. Growing up, there was a lot of, the one consistent part of my childhood was soccer. Soccer's all we had, soccer's all we loved to do as kids. We played soccer barefoot. We didn't have balls. We made balls out of rags. Our parents would give us old sheets and we'd wrap them together in rubber bands as tight as we could and make somewhat of a ball, and that's what we played with. That's all we knew, that's all we loved. We'd leave in the morning and come back in the evening. Senegal being a Muslim country, at 6 p.m., the mosques make a call for prayer, and that's when you know it's time to go home. We didn't have much money growing up, but we'd scrap things together. We would help the elders in the community if they needed us to go to the grocery shop, to the grocery store and get things for them. They'd give us a little bit of change. We would sit next to the road and wait for cars to break down. The cars are terrible in Senegal. They break down all the time. It's because we're so close to the ocean, the sand messes up with a lot of the cars. When cars break down and they need help getting pushed, a push start or pushed to the gas station, we'd be there and they'd give us a little bit of money. We'd take that money, go to another neighborhood, and challenge the kids to a game of soccer. Hey, we'll put down the equivalent of $1, $2. If you guys have that, let's play, and then the winner takes it all. And so we made a little bit of money that way, and that's how we spent a lot of our time. I did not feel like there was a class difference growing up. We were all on the same level, and that's part of Teranga. Nobody left Senegal, and nobody really aspired to leave Senegal. Everybody was comfortable, and we loved the life that we lived. At 4 or 5 years old, my dad left Senegal, a big no-no for the community, and he was looked down upon, but he strived for a lot more. My dad went to college, but he was not satisfied with the job that he had. He was a translator, and my dad speaks 8 languages. And he felt like he wasn't making the most of his education being in Senegal. And so he took a route that not a lot of people did. And it was tough for our family, especially my mom, because she was associated with him. And now she had to be the head of the household because he moved to Tanzania, Eastern Africa, to provide for the family. But when my dad left, there was a void in my life because my mom was the one raising me. And in Senegalese culture, it's always the man is the head of the household. But again, Teranga allowed the community and fathers in our community to step in and fill that void for me. So although my dad was gone for a year, I did not feel like I was missing a father. A year later, I was 5 or 6 years old. My dad comes back and takes me with him to Tanzania. My mom stays in Senegal alone. We lived with my dad's friend. Her name is Janice Timberlake, and she's a mother figure to me. And I call her my mom. Janice is blonde, blue-eyed, and her son, Ben, I call him my brother, blonde, blue-eyed. Daughter, Allison, my sister, blonde, blue-eyed. My dad takes me to this foreign country. I don't speak the language. They speak English in Tanzania and Swahili. And I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I don't speak, I'm very nervous. But one day, I remember asking Janice why she doesn't look like me. I had seen people that looked like her on TV, but I had never been so close to somebody like that. And I'll never forget, Janice said, "What do you mean? I look just like you." And I didn't really understand at the time. But when I used to hang around my stepbrother, and he used to take me around his friends and say, he introduced me as his brother. "Hey, this is my brother." They'd be like, they'd give us funny looks. He's like, "What? This is my brother." And he wouldn't go any further. No stepbrother, no nothing. He just called me his brother. And that warmed me up to the idea of meeting new people, because in Senegal, like I said, people don't leave and we know what we know, and that's what we like. And this made me very uncomfortable. But as I grew, I understood to be more accepting of people. Janice taught me a lot of things, a lot of weird things to me that people don't do in Senegal. She had a dog that lived in the house. The dog slept on the bed. In Senegal, we don't do that. The dogs stay outside. People are scared of dogs, and they're for security. Funny story, Ben and I had bunk beds. They weren't stacked on top of each other. They looked like that. And a week in, Ben hadn't spoken to me all week because this was right when I arrived. I was getting a lot of attention because I was new, I was uncomfortable. Janice gave me a lot of attention. My dad gave me a lot of attention. He's 5 years older than me, and he felt left out a little bit. So he looks over to me, and I'm not sleeping, and he says, "Sleep." And I don't speak English. And I'm trying to figure out what he's saying. "Sleep, sleep." He keeps saying it over and over again. So I pull down my pants and I show him my underwear. And he's laughing. I don't understand what's going on. A couple days later, I tell my dad, and it was lost in translation. I spoke Wolof. In Wolof, sleep means your underwear. And to this day, every family reunion, Ben reminds us of that. So going to going to Tanzania, I was 5, 6 years old. I spoke 4 languages. In Senegal, it's very common for kids to speak their native tongue, the native language, and if you're educated, you speak French. I went to an international school. I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with international schools. It's made up of kids from all over the world. Growing up, I had friends from China to Australia, Alaska, the most random places, and I thought that was the norm. But again, being in Tanzania, although so many variables that were new to me, the one thing that was a constant again was soccer. I was good. At first, I did not make a lot of friends, but soccer allowed me to make friends. And that's something that's been a constant for me throughout my life. Yes, I might not necessarily speak the language of the country where I've moved to, but soccer has been there, and soccer speaks for itself, and it brings people of all cultures together. Even in our locker room today, a lot of guys at FCC, a lot of guys don't speak English proficiently or are nervous to speak English to make mistakes. But when you're out on the field, you manage to communicate just through gestures, through movements, and soccer's allowed me to integrate into any society that I've been thrown into easily. I love Tanzania. We lived there for 5 years. I felt free, I felt safe, and that became my Taranga as soon as I was getting comfortable. That felt like home. But again, being at an international school, parents usually work for government organizations, and every couple of years, kids move. And so 5 years in, we left. My dad took us to, Janice's job, because Janice worked for the US government, took us to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was the toughest 5 years I had in my life. The president at the time was a dictator, Robert Mugabe, had been in for 37 years, and only recently, I'd say 5 to 7 years ago, resigned through military pressure. But my schedule when I was in Zimbabwe was go to school, come home. Go to school, play soccer, come home. That's all I had. No sleepovers, no nothing. And we had security at home. We had guards, guns, fences, and because that's just, the country was in turmoil. It just was not stable. And Zimbabwe was the first time I really realized that I was dark-skinned. It's weird. Everywhere, in Senegal, I grew up, I had lighter friends, and race never came up. In Tanzania, race never came up. And Zimbabwe, people talked about it so much and made fun of people so much that it really started taking its toll on me. I started seeing myself as different. And everywhere I had been, I felt like I was normal. And this was the first time even soccer created boundaries. The way teams were formed, the way people spoke to each other, and I just did not feel comfortable. It was not a great 5 years. But again, it was Janice's job. My dad moved there, and that's what it was. So that was the first place that I felt like there was no Taranga. I was not at home. I did not feel at peace. I did not feel welcome from the second I stepped there. Janice had had enough. She moved back to Virginia. I visited her one summer. I was playing in the park, and a man walks past, and he sees me playing soccer. And he says, "Hey, we have a soccer camp at the school down the road. Do you want to come?" "Yeah, I'll come." We went and talked to Janice. She allowed me to. I did well at the camp. He comes back to our home and says, to Janice's home, and says, "Hey, we want to offer him full scholarship to come to the school." And Janice thought it was a joke at first. She's like, "I have to see the facilities and all that." We went and saw it, and it is Episcopal High School. It's called Episcopal High School. It's a co-ed, all boarding school, very prestigious. John McCain graduated from there. A lot of people in the US government graduate from there. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. My dad allowed me to go. I went back, packed my bags in Zimbabwe, left, went alone on my first flight at 15 years old. When I got to immigration, the immigration officer put me in a room for about an hour and a half alone, didn't tell me anything. Comes back and is pestering me with questions. Where are you going? Where are you from? Who are you staying with? For how long? Do you have this document? Do you have that document? I'm a 15-year-old kid. I speak pretty well. I speak English pretty well, but I'm flustered. I don't know what to do. So I'm thinking I'm crying. I'm thinking I'm getting sent back. Eventually, Janice comes in. I have all my paperwork right, and that was my introduction to America. And I said, I do not want to be here. The whole ride home, I told Janice, I want to go back home. I want to go back home. And honestly, for the first year I was in the US, I wanted to go back home frequently. It did not seem welcoming. Everywhere I had been, and coming from Senegal, I was spoiled in that we had that Taranga feeling. My first introduction into Episcopal High School, the school in Virginia, was orientation. I showed up in a t-shirt and some shorts, and the dress code there is jacket, shirt, tie, every day. So already I don't fit in. I had never bought a suit before. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I was made fun of the first day, so again, it's not very welcoming. So I just went into my room, and they allowed me to stay in there for 2-3 days because I just did not want to come out. I did not eat, I did not do anything. I did not want to be in the US. There were 3 Africans in that school. The 2 others were basketball players, and then there was me. We formed our own little Taranga, our own little community. We weren't really accepted in that school. There are a lot of affluent kids who grew up together and stayed to each other. And so naturally we were forced to stay to each other. But in doing that, we developed a lot of resilience to a lot of things that we encountered. And although we each wanted to go home, we did not want to be here, we understood that we were here for a bigger reason. And although we were here because of our athletic talents, academically, we were, I would say, far superior than a lot of the other kids who were there. We understood that we have a lot more to lose than a lot of these kids, and that was the driving force to our success, I think, academically and athletically. Ultimately, I went to Boston University, and one of the basketball players, one went to Duke, one went to Wake Forest. And yes, athletically, I'm sure it helped us get into the schools, but our academics allowed us to get into. And during graduation, when they were naming out the schools that these kids were going into, it really gave us a sense of pride knowing that we were going to academically sound schools. Because everybody had been telling us that we only got into Episcopal because of our athletics. At Boston University, I had a successful 4 years. I could have gone pro earlier, but my dad made me promise that I would stay and complete my education. I was the second person in my family to have a college degree. And that surpasses any accomplishment I have ever had in my soccer career with my dad. First thing my dad always asked me when I called him in college is, how's school going? He didn't care about soccer. Although he was a professional soccer player himself in the past, he did not care anything about how soccer was going. He wanted to know academics and how everything was going. Fortunately, I had a good college career. I was invited to the Combine, but even at the Combine, Boston University is a small school. I was drafted 67th overall. At that point, it's an afterthought. The first 20 picks are important, and then it's nothing. Of my draft class, of the 86 players in my draft class, only 3 are still in the league, and I'm one of them. I've been fortunate enough to have a 9-year professional career thus far. The average MLS career is 3 years. I've been on 4 teams, and the same question I get everywhere I go is, why don't you settle down? Why don't you stay on one team? Is it hard to move around all the time? And I don't know if people honestly believe this, but I embrace going into new environments. I embrace new challenges, and I don't fear them because growing up I had moved so much. It's something that's just embedded in me where if it's time to go, be it my choice, be it another team's choice, I'm ready. Through all that I've been through, I've realized what has really kept me stable is my faith in God. I realized I was comfortable when I had the Taranga and I didn't need much, but once I was away from that, God is really what held my life together. When I was alone, crying myself to sleep at boarding school, I prayed a lot. And although in the moment I might not have seen things come to fruition that I was praying about, it definitely came down the line. And moving away was lonely, I cried a lot, but I did have a goal in mind. My goal was to provide for my family. And since I've been 15 years old, I've been able to provide for my mom especially. Now I have a daughter, so I have 2 families to provide for. In new environments, Prior to leaving, my dad sent me with a quote that read, "When we compare, we determine our worth according to other people's performance in life, leading to feelings of insignificance and insecurity." I still have that quote to this day. And that's helped me through a lot. When I've experienced challenges and experienced moments where I felt like I wasn't enough, that's a quote that's always been there to remind me that I determine what my value is, I determine what's important, and I determine the direction I'm headed in. I credit my mom for a lot of what I've achieved in life, because of the firm values and morals and boundaries she's allowed me to, she's instilled in me. Being away from Teranga, it's still embodied in me, and that's how I'd like to present myself. I hope anybody that meets me, will say, hey, Dom is warm, Dom's a nice guy, Dom will drop anything to help anybody out. Dom will make time for the people he cares about, and if I feel like it's reciprocated, that's my family. I really do believe that the energy that you carry attracts people in your life that radiate that same energy. Some for a short time, some for a long time. But valuable lessons are learned in all relationships. The older I get, the more I understand the relationships that warrant your time and effort. Those are the people you can lean on during hard times. Cincinnati has welcomed me and my family with open arms since day one. And for that, Cincinnati will forever be a Teranga of mine. Thank you.
Wow, huh? I just said to him, I said, that's good stuff. And, you know, you always